Salinas, our assistant superintendent, sends her regards. Unfortunately, she's not feeling well, so she'll be able to join us this evening. And we've got Dr. Rocha and Mr. Wasser from Instructional Services and Mr. Zamora's from Technology Department. Mr. Secretary, are you ready to do a roll call?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I'd like to point out, or if I could ask the district, please, to amend the roster. I believe that the roster does not yet reflect that Senora Gabriela Munoz is a co-chair.
Yes.
It doesn't currently say that. But anyway, I'll go ahead. Mr. Musto?
Yes.
Tammy Solis? Tammy Solis?
Sorry, present.
Oh, thank you so much. Vicky Chun? Anika Jain? Sissy Zhang?
Here.
Thank you. Gabriela Munoz?
Present.
Thank you so much. Harpreet Kaur? Prakash Dasot?
Present.
Thank you. Anna Shipper?
Here.
Thank you, Anna. Siddhartha Banerjee? Anne-Jeanette Pelletier?
Present.
Do you prefer your last name pronounced Pelletier or Pelletier, please?
Either one is fine. It is Pelletier, but Pelletier is fully acceptable.
Okay. Are you related to Kenneth Pelletier?
Maybe, but probably not. It's a very common last name in France and on the East Coast. But I did have 22 aunts and uncles on my dad's side.
He's a very famous psychologist in the Bay Area, I think. Anyway, let's keep going. Sorry, Dr. Rocha.
Here.
Thank you so much. Then Daniel Hillman. Trustee Jones.
Here.
Thank you so much. And Trustee Prasad, if it's not, I've seen you already, so if you're okay when you're driving, it's okay. I'll recognize your presence. Thank you. And I also see Mr. Wasser. I'd like to recognize you as present also.
Thank you. Present.
Mr. Co-Chair, that concludes the roll. And I believe that we have 8 voting members present, and I believe that constitutes a quorum.
Thank you very much. We have one more person entering. I'm not, Ms. Dorsey's joining us from FUTA. She may be taking Victoria's place.
I'm sorry, if you allow me to speak for a quick second. I'm also the interpreter for Spanish. I'm just trying to check who, if I'm supposed to be on the feature as a translator on here or call the person that requests the interpreter.
Thank you for being here. Could you maybe make the announcement in Spanish if there's a preference for someone to do on a cell phone?
Señora Muñoz, ¿tienes el número de Claudia? Sorry, I'm just doing some technical.
Sí, también ella tiene el mío.
Okay. ¿Y estás, puedes escuchar el del español o todavía no?
Configuración. Es que no me da la opción para cambiar el idioma.
Okay, déjame
decirle.
Okay, déjame decirle al señor Musto. Mr. Musto, sorry. Do you see the feature to add a translator in the settings?
Yeah, I don't remember how to do that. I apologize. If anyone could walk me through it, I'd appreciate it.
Do you want to make me co-chair? If
I
you
can
want to
do
make
that.
me, what is it called? Co-whatever, and then I can add her.
Yep, I will do that.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. We're just doing the.
Okay. Dr. Rocha, can you let me know when we're ready?
Yes, let me see.
Also, Mr. Chair, have we started the recording?
I am not certain. Mr. Zamora, can you hear us? Do we know if we're being broadcast? Oh, he says yes. Thank you very much. So pardon us for the technical difficulties. I was also out myself today, so we're dealing with some illness in our department, unfortunately.
So, Mr. Musto, I think it has to go originally in the settings because I'm trying to kind of adjust them.
Okay,
Mr. Co-Chair, I'm not sure if I can speak on behalf of the group, but being an elected official of this committee, just as you are, I think that we would all like to see this matter resolved so that our co-chair can be properly connected. And for that reason, we are comfortable waiting.
thank you very much.
I'm gonna log off and see if I can do it on the back end. So give me a sec.
I'd like to add, Mr. Wasser, generally when a meeting is being recorded, it would show on my screen and I don't see that. So I don't want to contradict you, but I don't see that it shows on my screen that this is being recorded.
If I don't believe I'm not sure it's being recorded, it is being streamed, however.
I see. I misunderstood then because I'm like, wait, no, I don't think it's very good.
Mr. Co-Chair, I'm sitting in a room with 2 cellos, 2 guitars, a piano, and several other instruments, and I wish I could use them. I would play something for you.
I was an expert cello player once upon a time. Well, not really. I was a decent.
So are we saying that we need an agenda item for that? Can you just play?
Okay. My apologies to Ms. Munoz for the delay here, and Ms. Escobedo. It sounds like they're going to be doing a cell call, so that we'll be able to enable participation.
Unfortunately, I was not able to do it since I'm not the host. So,
Yeah. Ms. Escobedo is going to call Ms. Munoz.
okay.
Could Ms. Munoz or Escobedo let us know when it's appropriate to get going?
Okay, I'm dialing now. I'm just waiting for her to pick up.
Thank you.
Señora, le estoy marcando a su celular. Si por favor podría contestar, es 6473. Perdón, 53.
No, no me está entrando. Oh, ya.
Okay, we're connected.
Thank you very much. And I apologize to everyone, especially to Ms. Munoz for the delay. We will ensure this does not happen again. Thank you very much for joining us. This meeting is typically the meeting that we're looking at in December, where we're looking at the California dashboard and all the updates there. So I guess in the bigger picture, we might be a little behind, but what we're going to see in the next couple months, we have our next meeting in 2 weeks, is we're going to start moving pretty quickly towards composition of the LCAAC. We're going to start with looking at previous goals, anything we want to adjust, and then what are some new ideas we want to bring forth. So although seems like we're off to a slow start, things will pick up pretty quickly. So that my comments aside, why don't we do this? We have the agenda posted. Is that agenda acceptable? I will, what is it? What do I need to say? If there's a motion.
Approve.
Motion for approval. Thank you, Ms. Munoz.
I will second.
Anyone object?
I'm sorry, who's second, Mr. Chair?
That was me, Victoria.
Oh, thank you, Victoria. I also recognize you as present. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Now to the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting. Hopefully everyone has a chance to review those. Any comments, questions, anything that needs to be clarified? Although not part of the minutes, we will update the roster to correctly represent the positions.
I will also send you an email to that effect, Mr. Chair, so co-chair, so you can focus on the meeting.
Thank you. And Ms. Pelletier?
I have just one small edit. There's a spot in the agenda item under number 4 where my name is written and my first name is indicated as Anne. Just a little tiny adjustment for my first name. A long name, so I'm sure it's just a typing error. So thank you. And other than that, I would move that we approve the minutes.
Ms. Solis?
I see also in on the second page, my name is misspelled. It has a Y instead of an IE. That's the only edit that I see, and I would second your motion.
Okay. Mr. Lechner, do you see where those edits are needed?
You can all bear with me for 1 second. I'm on this tiny computer, and I just want to make sure that I pull up the right file. These misspellings are very embarrassing to me, so I apologize. Okay.
I'm pleased it wasn't Angie.
I have them now, and Ms. Pelletier, which this would be. Oh, I see it under item 4. I misspelled your name. That is now fixed, and then the second name. Did I misspell Sissy again?
No, it's on the second page. My first name is spelled with a Y as opposed to an IE.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the agenda and I couldn't see who's talking.
Ms. Solis?
This is Tammy Solis.
Ms. Solis, I apologize. I am a foreigner and I struggle with the English language sometimes. I'll try not to do that again.
And sometimes autocorrect will take over too, and there's no need to apologize.
Thank you.
Okay, so with those corrections in mind, we have a motion, we have a second. Are there any objections?
And then, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I was distracted with trying to locate the minutes on my computer. The first and the second, could you please restate?
I believe Ms. Pelletier was the first and Ms. Solis was the second.
Okay. Thank you so much. Sorry.
Okay, very good. Next is public comment or oral communications. We have no one in the wait room. If there is anyone who could raise their hand if they want to do a public comment. Okay, that being said, if it comes up later in the meeting, a public comment is wanted, the group can entertain if we want to listen at that time. Okay, now to the main course of today's presentation. I'd like to introduce Mr. Eli Wasser. He has joined instructional services from being a principal at Ardenwood this school year, and he's jumped right into it with LCAAC and the California dashboard. So he's going to give a presentation that is much like the presentation he delivered to the board recently, where he's going to go over our dashboard metrics, which will be very central and essential for our LCAAC construction. So with that, pass it over to Mr. Wasser.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Musso. I appreciate the introduction, and just kind of procedurally here, would it be best if I share my screen to move through the presentation?
Yes, and I will.
I think I have access to do so. And also, I like how you qualified earlier that the work that we're doing here in January of 2023 in some ways is what the committee would expect to be doing earlier in the school year. But as we were paying attention back in late 2022, districts across the state of California were highly anticipating when the embargo or would end or the public release would begin of public accountability data. And so that took place back in December of 2022. And most recently, earlier this month, a comprehensive presentation, much like which will be given here tonight, was given to the Board of Education. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and share some screens here. Right, wonderful. So just giving a little bit of a primer background. I know that the last time I had the opportunity to speak to the committee, we reviewed the purpose of the dashboard and some of the changes that will be seen in this year's iteration. Nonetheless, it's a good idea to just rehash some of the key details. Of course, the dashboard has not been publicly released since the 2018 and 19 school year worth of data. Initially, the dashboard was created back in 2013 as the local control funding formula not only changed the way schools were funded, but was also instrumental in changing how public accountability, the public reporting of information for schools and school districts would change. And of course, the information and metrics that are presented on the dashboard are part of the essential ongoing task for districts and schools to establish goals, reflect back on them, and make changes. And that happens both at the district level with the local control accountability plan, as well as the site level with the single plans for student achievement. The dashboard, of course, is very much tied to LCFF priorities. For those 8 priorities that districts are responsible for, not including priorities that county offices of education interact with. The state indicators that are displayed on the dashboard are calculated based off of information that is reported through the state in formal ways, such as through the California Longitudinal Pupil Achievement Data System, or what we call CalPADS. Also information about academic performance is communicated through the state's authorized testing vendors for things like the SBAC exams. Some information, however, is not acquired through that type of reporting, and instead is reported directly to the state by districts themselves through self-reporting, and that's called the local indicators. And so the local indicators touch on a different set of priorities with only the area of school climate kind of having a blended both state indicator as well as a local indicator. So jumping into what the dashboard for 2022 presents for Fremont Unified School District in regards to the local indicators, it's wonderful to note that across all 5 local indicators, the Fremont Unified School District did receive a standard MET score. It is a binary rating, either standard MET or standard not met. And so this rating was received based on the self-reflection tool that was presented to the Board of Education back in June of 2022 in conjunction with the adoption of the LCAAC. For the state indicators, this is kind of returning back to the primer presentation that we had previously on the dashboard. In previous years, the dashboard would be making use of actually 2 years worth of data, both a current year status as well as change data from the previous academic year that allowed for a multicolor scale of performance from lowest red to highest blue to be created. This year's dashboard, however, is not going to be making use of those visuals, with some of the measures being on pause in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The 2022 dashboard only will be making use of status data from the 2021-22 school year. So these cell phone style bars that you see at the bottom of the screen range from a very low performance to a very high performance. I'll give a bit of an asterisk here because for a couple of the state measures, these ratings actually switch direction, and I'll go ahead and talk about that when we get to the appropriate point in the analysis. So our first actual state indicator is called the academic indicator. That, of course, is referencing performance within the content areas of English language arts and mathematics. It's calculated for student performance on SBAC exams taken in grades 3 through 8 as well as 11. District-wide, Fremont Unified received the highest ranking possible, very high performance in both academic content areas. And what's interesting to note is that our district's performance outpaced that of both the county and state levels. 77% of students tested in Fremont Unified scored proficient or above on the ELA SBAC exam, and 70% of students across the district of testing age scored proficient or above on the mathematics SBAC exam. On the dashboard, they actually use the terms above or below standard, which you can see referenced underneath these 2 larger purple graphs. And so it's not only important to talk about the percentage of students that are proficient or above on these exams, but how far from standard they were scoring. SBAC exams get a rating of 1, 2, 3, or 4, with 4 being the highest. Any student who scores a 3 or a 4 is considered a standard met or above. And so raw scores create windows where students can either score a 1, 2, 3, or 4. And so the state says, what is the average score from the lowest score possible to obtain a level 3 proficient? And so those are the two measurements that are underneath the English language arts and mathematics graphs here. Looking to the bottom of the graph, one of the great things about the dashboard is not only does it provide information about the district as a whole, but it also disaggregates the data according to the various student groups that are publicly reported. And so this is, of course, essential information for the committee to be aware of as it goes through looking at various metrics that are represented in the LCAAC. And so while we see that district-wide we're performing at a very high level, there most certainly are learning outcomes that are being achieved at differing levels across the district. Undoubtedly, some of our populations that were most vulnerable to some of the disruptions that were created or at least could be attributed to the COVID-19 pandemic were some of the populations that had some of the lower academic performance. Looking at graduation rate, Fremont Unified graduation rate for the 2021-22 school year was 93.9%, which is more or less maintaining that same level of graduation from pre-pandemic levels. This number actually is used to in calculating both the graduates, the percent of graduates from the class of 2022 who earned their standard diploma within 4 years, as well as those students from the class of 2021 or fifth-year graduates who earned their diploma after 5 years at the high school level. Some of these students earned their diploma with the support of Assembly Bill 104, which did modify across the state of California grading policies and how many credits students needed to earn to be able to get their high school diploma during the pandemic. Similarly, also looking to our performance as a district in comparison to the county and state, our district's graduation rates exceeded that of statewide results in all reportable student groups, except for 2, which were homeless students, where our graduation rate was a little over 12% lower than state average, as well as white students at 0.2% lower than state averages. Even though as we look on the bottom of this slide here and we see again the idea that outcomes are achieved at different levels by student group, we're still able to find relative areas of celebration. Even though we see that our students of disability are listed here as the medium level performance, compared to their graduation rate back in 2019 or pre-pandemic levels, that actually has increased by 5%. So we did see some growth even in our student populations that might have had lower overall ratings for that single year. Even though this is technically the return of the California School Dashboard this year, the college and career indicator will be the one state indicator that actually will not be reported. The state plans to reintroduce this measure on the 2023 dashboard. And the rationale behind this particular indicator being absent this year is because it's a compound measure. There's a number of different factors that go into determining whether a graduate from Fremont Unified is ready for the rigor of college coursework or to enter into the workforce. And so since it takes multiple years worth of data to end up making that determination, not only for Fremont Unified, but for the entire state of California, this indicator is not reported this year. Next dashboard in 2023, while the plan is for other indicators to return back to that more colorful red to blue display of performance, the college and career indicator will look purple as the indicators this year do. Chronic absenteeism most certainly is an area of interest for Fremont Unified, Alameda County, and the state of California. Chronic absenteeism is a measure of school attendance that the state tracks for students in grades kindergarten through 8. It's not that we don't care about attendance rates for those students in high school, but the idea is attendance rates and their impact is captured in other indicators such as academic progress or whatnot. And so it's important to note that while Fremont Unified School District's overall chronic absenteeism level at 13.1% is near triple pre-pandemic levels, I think that there needs to be a very large conceptual or understanding asterisk with that. We returned back to the classroom physically last year in a year where an approved COVID vaccine for 5 to 11-year-olds had not been authorized yet. The Omicron variant impacted not only Fremont Unified, but most certainly California and the nation. And our students and families were doing their due diligence to be responsible and responsive to continuing changing guidelines provided by county authorities like the Alameda County Public Health Office, as well as ACOE. So we do see that on the bottom here, that across the board, no student group within Fremont Unified had a low or a very low chronic absenteeism rate. And this is one of the indicators where those purple bars are reversed. Typically, we want to see performance to be very high. Well, we want our absenteeism level to be very low. A child is marked chronically absent if they miss 10% or more of their enrolled school year. All right. Going to the next one here with English learner performance. This indicator tracks the progress that our students are making in terms of acquiring English language proficiency. So Fremont Unified as a whole scored at the medium ranking with 54% of our current English language learners making progress towards language acquisition. They're able to do that one of two ways, which is either to maintain the highest level of performance at a level 4 on their annual summative English language performance assessment, or their LCAAC, or moving up one of the English learner progress indicator levels, or one of the LP levels on that exam. What's interesting to note is that when we look at our reclassified EL students, we see that not only does their multilingual skill set pay off in terms of this particular indicator, but also multilingual students within Fremont Unified oftentimes outperform their English-only speaking peers. So the graph here at the bottom shows SBAC content exams in English language arts and mathematics. And you can see here in the middle column that for those students with the multilingual skills, their average score above the lowest possible proficiency level is actually higher than the English only cohort within the district. The suspension rate indicator, like chronic absenteeism, is the other indicator that has the switched performance level. Again, normally we would want to see that our performance is very high. For suspension, we want the suspension rate to be very low. So students are coded as being suspended if they are suspended for one or more school days throughout the academic year. Students that are incorporated into this measure do not get counted twice. So if a single student were suspended twice, they're still only counted once. If a single student were suspended and the particular infraction warranted a multi-day suspension, they're still only counted as once. So Fremont Unified School District had an excellent low rate ranking of overall suspension rate of only 1.2% of our students being suspended. We did see that across the board, all of our student groups actually saw a reduction in their overall suspension rate, with the greatest drop being experienced by our African-American students, whose suspension rate dropped from 7.2% back in 2019 to 4.9% on this year's dashboard. And I think it's really a testament to the wonderful work that has been going on at our elementary and secondary campuses with focused suspension prevention efforts. It's a year in which students return to the campus, and a lot of our social interaction norms, collaborative structure had to be relearned or strengthened. And so having a low suspension rate as a district during this most important year of return to in-person learning, I think is a relative area for celebration for the district. So I wanted to, this can be slightly visually overwhelming here, but what I've displayed here is when we look at all of the different state indicators, and actually on the left two most columns, that academic indicator has been broken apart into separating English language arts, SBAC exams, and mathematics SBAC exams. We see the color ranking for all of the different student groups that are publicly reported on the California school dashboard. So up at the top row, we see the overall performance of the entire district. But we can see that outcomes, both academic, behaviorally, attendance, graduation, are most certainly still experienced at a different level, depending on which row we look at. And this is what I consider to be, the prime work of this committee, is to be looking at these individual rows and seeing, reflecting back on the idea of what information is being given to us. How does that help us reflect back on goals that are written within the LCAAC, and how can we work to make sure that we're allocating time, energy, and money to ensure that all students have excellent outcomes within Fremont Unified. So looking to two places within the current LCAAC itself, one of the measures talks about being able to raise academic achievement for students in Fremont Unified with having specific targets for some of our student groups. One of the student groups that scored at the lowest rating on the California school dashboard for Fremont Unified in multiple state priorities were our were our homeless students. So looking to see back where the 2018 and 2019 baseline was established within the LCAAC, we see that at the time, students without permanent housing were scoring approximately 35.6 points below the standard in English language arts. Moving forward to the first year outcome reported on the LCAAC, it's interesting that we don't have the prior year's SBAC data because, of course, that wasn't taking place during our shutdown in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, aside from grade 11 students. But the LCAAC does display a local set of assessments for iReady. Looking to year 2 outcome, of which we're in that cycle, we can make use now of last year's SBAC data. So we see now that students without permanent housing actually had a significantly decreased academic performance in ELA on the SBAC exams at 76.4 points below standard. And so we're at a really unique time where the district, the committee, the entire educational community of Fremont has established a baseline and created a plan, but then we also have the COVID-19 pandemic that has impacted all of education. And so this is why I think the superintendent, both locally here in Fremont, as well as State Superintendent Thurman, has encouraged us to look at the current dashboard as a new baseline to respond to. Not only was this performance level in English language arts a decrease from the established baseline, using the same graphic here to talk about where our established baseline for mathematics performance was for various student groups, and then where our current dashboard reports us the anticipated goal of increasing that academic performance for the student group was not realized. So I think that most certainly the work moving forward is now that we have access to this most important information, both for the entire district as well as for some of our student groups, how do we make use of reflecting back on the LCAAC to make sure that students across Fremont Unified are achieving at high levels. And so I'm going to hit the stop share button there, as that's the end of my slide deck. But I'd be happy to attempt to field any questions that anybody has on this data, or anything that they might have looked at themselves on the publicly accessible dashboard. Trustee Jones, I see your hand up.
Thank you.
Yeah, so looking at the data, I know this committee, the LCAAC funds we're supposed to be targeting unduplicated students. Is that correct? And I see, certainly there are categories of students reflected in this data who are unduplicated, and I'm sure that's what we're going to be focusing on. But I know that some of the students who need support are not necessarily unduplicated. They fall into ethnic groups, and ethnic groups aren't identified as unduplicated necessarily. So I'm wondering how we target all of the students who need support, not just the unduplicated students. Is there something else going on in the district that's looking at the breakdowns that aren't necessarily applicable to just unduplicated students?
So while there is a requirement to make sure that unduplicated students are being called out specifically within the LCAAC, We do see other student groups that are not, as you said, unduplicated, referenced within the plan. So there's nothing that keeps the district from describing action steps or establishing goals for other student groups. I think financially wise, obviously there is a difference in terms of making sure that certain monies are directed towards student groups. But goals written within the LCAAC also make use of some of our students' ethnic groups.
Okay, so with the LCAAC, we wouldn't necessarily be able to specifically say target with the funds that we're dealing with. We wouldn't be able to target, say, African-American students for anything specific unless they also happen to be unduplicated in some way. Is that correct with these funds?
Can I add to that? So what we can look at is where's the intersect between some of our ethnic groups and racial groups and with the unduplicated count, because there are instances where we do have students who fall in many categories. And so just like some of the work we've done with special ed, we see where that intersect lies, and then we're able to make some adjustments. The other thing with the funding, just to be kind of clear on that around just for our group, is that the money is targeted for our unduplicated students, but there are actions that we have within the LCAAC that do serve all students, but that they need to principally serve those unduplicated students to make some movement towards whatever metrics or thing we're trying to achieve. So does that kind of clarify that, Trustee Jones?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Pelletier?
Yeah, I have a question that is maybe somewhat related to what Trustee Jones was asking, but I am interested in some of the, again, some of the other plans that are also going on at the same time, some of the other work. I know that you know that I come from the field of education, and so I really see the issue of alignment as really important. So although this committee is really charged with the unduplicated pupils in the LCAAC, and LCAAC can only be so effective if it aligns with the other activities that are happening in the district. And so I wonder about two things very specifically. Was Fremont selected for differentiated assistance for any of these student groups that we just saw that were in that very low group? You did it so fast, and I know that there's a requirement for two areas, and so I'm just wondering if there are also alignment opportunities in the differentiated assistance identification, if Fremont was identified, and also seeing that students with disabilities are also not a required unduplicated student group, but are very low to low across the board. I also am very interested in what you see as the availability of alignment opportunities with your CSACE plan, your continuing coordinated early intervening services activities. So I'm sort of wondering what you see as opportunities there, because I believe that an LCAAC is one of the legs of your stool of support, and you can't develop it in isolation, even though it has a very clear focus.
Absolutely. And I very much appreciate you returning back to differentiated assistance. On the last slide that I presented, where it had the scatter shot of different performance levels across the different student groups, it would have been the right time for me to talk about differentiated assistance. A student group ends up creating differentiated assistance if they score at the lowest potential rating within two or more indicators that touch on different state priorities. And so we do have two student groups in Fremont Unified for differentiated assistance, and those would be our homeless and foster youth students. So homeless students scored at the lowest performance ranking in both the math and ELA academic indicator. And for this year, it had to be a combined indicator of them receiving that both in English language arts and mathematics. So again, homeless students with academic indicator, chronic absenteeism, and graduation rate, with foster youth having qualified under chronic absenteeism and suspension rate. So with that, Fremont Unified will be working with the Alameda County Office of Education to address those particular areas of growth.
I'd also like just to throw in, my job is working on the CSACE plan. So yes, I wholly concur. I doubt this group would know much about the CSACE, but I do think that would be an important introduction, maybe at a future meeting. Trustee Jones?
Yeah, I wanted to speak just briefly about something that I raised at the board meeting where this was presented to us. And the dashboard, in this presentation, we're looking at performance of students across the district as a whole. I just want folks to know that you can go to the dashboard and look at the data by school site. And when you do that, there are some concerning things that come up where we have, I'm pulling this up, I'll use high school math as an example. And at Mission, the students score 140 points above standard. And at Kennedy, students are 44 points below standard. So there are differences that stark differences that we see site by site. And I'm wondering if, and that we see it in elementary schools, we see it in junior high, there are a lot of differences with our sites. Do we know if we're seeing that site difference because certain schools have higher populations of those student groups that are struggling, or is there something that we can target by school site to help some of the sites where we're seeing, results that could definitely use some improving, that are more concerning?
Your statement that some of our schools within Fremont Unified have different numbers of students within these student groups is an accurate statement. And I think one of the things that individual schools need to be cautioned about, and the Instructional Services Division is working with site administration to make sure that they have a very clear view of not only their dashboard, but also of information that might not necessarily be immediately apparent on a quick glance, is that some of these measures and reporting is only publicly available if a student population reaches a certain size threshold. And so while, say, for homeless students, we do have a large enough population of students district-wide to warrant reporting, that is not the case for all of our individual schools. And so it's really important that while the dashboard might not for a single site have this helpful visual analysis, we want to make sure that individual school sites are equipped with information about their individual learners, especially in some of these vulnerable student groups that we need to be supporting.
Mr. Lechner?
Director Wasser, I just wanted to thank you very much for this informative presentation. I'm somewhat new to these numbers and probably can't ask the same detailed questions as Trustee Jones, but I found the presentation very helpful. I have one quick question. If you could please say briefly something about the local climate survey. I serve as a crossing guard at the Bringhurst Elementary School every day, and the weather has not been great. what exactly is the climate survey, please?
Local climate survey is a measure that makes use of perceptions of the school site. So in previous years, last school year, there were two main vehicles in which information was sourced from students. The California Healthy Kids Survey brings in information about fifth graders. I'm blanking on what the secondary survey was called.
The Stanford survey.
Oh, the Challenge Success Stanford survey. And so there's a measure of both connectedness as well as safety, basically creating an environment that is conducive to learning. This school year, the fifth graders just recently completed a survey to bring information into the district. We'll be repeating that process for 7th, 9th, and 11th graders for this school year as well.
My apologies. So I misunderstood that this is an environmental indicator about how conducive the environment is to learning. It's got nothing to do with the climate.
Yeah.
But
One of those
correct
terms in education that gets you.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Rocha?
Yes, thank you. Just kind of comments on two things that from the group around alignment was one of the kind of comments, which is really important. And so I just want to kind of give the group a context that we've been very fortunate to receive many state funds and other funding sources. And so how as instructional services, we can braid funds if it's allowable so that we're able to not only serve unduplicated students, say in the case of in this role as an LCAAC, but other students as well. And how do we kind of upscale some of those services? So those are things that LCAP is one of the very many pieces that we've received as recently. We've gotten learning loss funds. And so just for this group to know, one of those cases in point is our counselors, our elementary counselors. That was very important for our community when we established those through the LCAP, through ELOG, which is another state funding source. We were able to then expand the counselors from part-time at 2 sites to full-time, utilizing those funds. In the case of CSACE as well, we have intervention teachers, and that is being funded through multiple funding sources. So again, this is the kind of the work that we as a group need to look at as what are our priorities and identify if money was not a thing, right? We would be able to fully fund all of these things. But we've been very fortunate in the last couple of years to receive funding sources from other places to kind of braid those funds so that it's a bigger, wider net to serve all kids. So there's that. And then what was the other? Sorry, my brain is a little fried right now. There was another comment from, I don't remember, sorry. If I remember, I'll raise my hand, so I'll stop there, Mr.
Okay, Ms. Chan?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. I think it's been really, oh, sorry, I thought I lost the Zoom for a second. I think it's been really beneficial to have the elementary counselors not split, right? We have one at every site, and that's been great for our students, especially coming out of the pandemic. But is this something that we see as going to be sustainable for future years? Yeah.
I'll just speak as a member of this committee. That was the plan, is that
Okay.
we make this incorporated within the LCAP.
Good. Okay. Yeah. I hope that we continue to do that. I think it's supporting and really good for our students and families. So that's really, that's a positive thing to hear. So thank you.
Ms. Pelletier.
Thank you for all of that great information about some of the alignment stuff. I will probably drive you crazy about continuing to bring it up because there's so many different opportunities about things. You didn't even mention UPK and UTK, and we got stuff coming. So, but I really appreciate that. I do have a question about whether or not the district could provide to this group as we move forward and looking at those unduplicated pupils who are not all unduplicated. As Trustee Jones said, some of them belong to student racial and ethnic groups. Like, for example, is there a way to unpack the English learner status by ethnicity, race, so that we could consider the impact of English learner status for youth who are Hispanic and English learners, or who are Pacific Islander and English learners, to look at some of those groups who were lower performing and who are English learners. So they are technically in an unduplicated group, but it might be more useful for the group to think about some of the more disaggregated data that is available at the district level.
So yes, this group in the past has often requested data that we can provide. So if as we get into our goal setting, if we want to do more targeted for unduplicated students, but maybe that would have a greater impact than unduplicated students, that data can be gathered.
I know that Mr. Musto and myself have had numerous conversations about the difference between data and demographic information and kind of mandated compliance reporting versus what are data analytics and reports that really can move our work forward. So I know that topic at least is of great importance to the instructional services division. So by all means, if there is a particular piece of information that, while might not be a mandated requirement for reporting, but is something that helps move our conversation in a positive direction, I definitely want to be a part of being able to provide that.
Are there any other questions for Mr. Wasser? Well, thank you very much. It was a great presentation. We certainly got a good overview of the district. So as I mentioned earlier, our next meeting is in 2 weeks. And Dr. Rocha kind of gave a preview of what I wanted to talk about, which is this group has been really influential the last few years in making some significant improvements to Fremont schools. She mentioned the elementary counselors that was a real big success to add those. And we are now incorporating more intervention teachers and behaviorists as part of LCAAC and related plans that have been mentioned. So this is the group that if there is an idea that you've had, schools would be better if we could do this, next meeting is going to be the time where we want to solicit some of those ideas, because chances are if you have an idea, someone else in the community and someone else in the school district has thought it's a good idea as well. So it's a good opportunity for us to talk about big picture items where we want to see our district moving towards. Okay, that is the end of our agenda. I want to put it out there. Is there any other public comment or any other comments that for the good of the order? Ms. Chan?
I missed the meeting last month. I had a representative come, but when I was looking over the minutes, it looks like we had moved the discussion of meeting in person to this meeting. Is it so? Are we going to do that discussion? Or did we decide to continue to meet online?
I apologize. I don't know that answer. We take our direction from Ms. Salinas on this.
Okay.
And she's ill this evening, so I'm not sure what her thinking is on that. We will have a response for that in 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. All right. That sounds good. I just wanted to make sure I planned accordingly.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Lecter?
Mr. Co-Chair, Ms. Chon, I joined a City of Fremont Library Commission meeting yesterday, and the City of Fremont decided that all the boards and commissions would have to return to in-person meetings in 2023. So yesterday I started up my car and drove to the library. And while I also recognize that the item maybe should have been on the agenda today, that's probably because the school district is trying to figure out what we're going to do. And I trust that the people that requested the change in time probably still find the online venue more convenient than going to the district office in person.
You're absolutely right. We do take cues from the trustees and so we should have an update for you soon at the next meeting on that. Okay, With that in mind, with that said, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We will see you again in 2 weeks. And thank you very much for your help.